I'm going to stay in John because it's one of my very favorite subjects out of the Bible tonight, what I'm going to talk about for a little while. But I almost don't want Ken to know it because I don't want him to skip this. I very, very much want to hear what he has to say when the time comes. If you have your Bibles, it'll be in John the 13th chapter. John 13. I've given this lesson before in a classroom setting, and I think I even preached it once. And there was a semester in school where I actually used it when I was teaching humanities in how to treat people and how to deal with people. So this isn't new material to me, but it is a little bit nerve-wracking to be talking to this group of people. As we start tonight, I'm going to give you a few seconds to actually think about something. I want you to dream with me or think for just a minute. If you knew that this was your last evening alive on earth, what would you do? I actually want you to consider that question for just 2 or 3 seconds. Most of us obviously would take the opportunity to be with family or those that are closest to you in this world. But I want you to think also about what you would say to them. Absolutely you would. You would want to talk about your love to them, maybe the good times. But I think that you would also want to give instructions, how to carry on. I'm sure some of you have had that happen in your life where you talked for the last time with somebody. I know I've had it happen. One of the dearest friends that I ever had called me in the day before he was dying. He and I both knew he was. And he made me laugh. It was very upsetting in other ways, but he gave me instructions. From that day to this, I think of the things that he talked about, and I still try to do them. What we're going to talk about tonight is very similar to what we're going to talk about in John the 13th chapter. This is the evening before Christ died. And he does that very thing. He brings together the people that were the most meaningful to him at that moment in time, those 12 apostles. Chapter 13 begins by saying, "It was just before the Passover feast. Jesus knew that the time had come for him to leave this world and to go to the Father." So Christ is with his 12 apostles that evening meal, and it would prove to be what we all call the Last Supper. The only problem with all of this is the apostles, the 12 guys that he was with, didn't know it. They didn't know that it was the last night. They were totally unaware of what was about to happen. And so they have no special sense of closeness to Christ at that moment. In fact, if you'll follow the story in the book of Luke, the apostles actually get into a squabble among each other about what? Remember? Who was going to be the greatest among them. So it was what was actually happening, they had no conception of. They weren't concerned really about Jesus at that moment in time. Who are they concerned about? Themselves. But Jesus knows that later they will look back and see all that has happened through the previous 3 years, and they would understand what he was trying to get across to them. He wanted to leave with them one last very important lesson. Now, this story is so interesting to me for several reasons. First of all, the human interaction, what was said, what was done, a real event that really happened, and these guys were learning, and they moved forward with what they learned. But in a bigger sense, Christ is teaching them a lesson. And not only that, but he's teaching us a lesson 2,000 years later. But this material is for us. So we need to remember that. Jesus begins washing their feet. At this meal, beginning in verse 4, John 13 says, Jesus got up, he took off his outer clothing and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that he had wrapped around him. Then verses 12 through 17, I want to read that too. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. If I am Lord and teacher and have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. I tell you the truth, the servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. Now, what does the word blessed mean in the Beatitudes? What's another word for blessed? Happy, happy. It's exactly the same word that is used in Matthew and the Beatitudes. So he says, if you will do these things, meaning being a servant to others, you will be happy if you do them. Now, all of us here tonight recognize the fact that Christ wasn't instituting a foot washing thing for our worship services. That was not the point. We have no record of all of any church practicing a foot washing as part of the worship activity. All Christ was doing was to emphasize something that he had been teaching all along. He had taught before the idea of being a servant, and to you and I. What other story in the Bible, somebody think now, is a prime example that Christ taught about servanthood? Can anybody think of one? There's a major one. Anybody? How about the parable in Luke chapter 10 that Jesus taught about the Good Samaritan? We're not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about that, but let's go over it just a little bit. In the parable, he talked about a Jewish man that was on his way from Jerusalem to Jericho, where he was attacked, beaten, robbed, and left for dead. A Jewish priest came by and saw him, a religious man, and he passed by on the other side. A Levite, another Jew, a religious Jew, came by, saw the man, was in a hurry, passed by on the other side. But then what happened? A third guy came by. A Samaritan of all people. Ken's told us, we've all known that Samaritans and Jews hated each other. But this Samaritan came by and he had pity on the man and he took care of him. He stopped. He took time out of his day. He bandaged the man's wounds. He poured oil and wine in the wounds. He loaded him on his donkey and he carried him to the inn and took care of him. And the next day he left money to continue taking care of him because he went on his way. Said he would come back later and make everything right if he owed more. Then the disciples heard Jesus tell just a few hours before this supper about judgment. They had heard Jesus say that those who will be rewarded with heaven will be those who give water to the thirsty, meat to the hungry, clothing to the naked, and visits to those who need visiting. And now it was the foot washing time example. Jesus says in his last evening with these men, if you will do this same things to one another, don't miss that. He says to one another. He did not say wash my feet. Everybody would have wanted to do that. They would have wanted to do that. We would all be anxious to do that. But that's not what Jesus said. He said, if you will wash one another's feet, that's the secret to everything that I've been trying to teach you. And then he says at the end, you will be blessed. The person that washes the feet will be blessed. Happy. So all of that means if you're that kind of person, is he actually saying, I'm supposed to go wash Burke's feet? He's got his shoes off right now. No, he didn't. No, that's not the point. That's not the point. The point is we are to look for reasons to be of service to others. Now, back to that night. These men didn't understand at that time totally what was going on, but later, you know they did. After the crucifixion and the resurrection, they had time to think, and in their minds, you know, it went back to that night. Their thoughts did. Just like ours would if you were visiting with a loved one for the last time and what they said. And I think the lesson worked on them. Let me give you some examples. Acts 3. The apostles are just getting into the work for which Jesus had been preparing them. The work for which they had been chosen. They were spreading the word. They were spreading the good news of the kingdom. And they're very busy in what they're doing. On the way to the temple, at the hour of prayer. Which two apostles was it? Peter and John. They were on their way to the temple to the hour of prayer, and they came across a crippled man. He's doing all he can for a living. He's begging, doing what he can do. As Peter and John walked by, they had pity on him. He sticks out his cup or whatever it was that he had, and he was asking for money. And they took time and they stopped. What did they say? You remember?
I don't have any money, but...
We don't have money, but we'll give you what we've got. They did what Jesus would have done in that situation. They did what Jesus had told them to do. They stopped and said, silver and gold, I don't have any, but I'll give you what I have. And that he did. Man jumped to his feet and began to walk. The lesson of Jesus for those men extends to us tonight. We are to be servants, from the greatest among us to the least. We are to be servants. So, what I want to do for what little time we have left is to be practical about our lives tonight and what that lesson means to us in a very practical way. So let's make some applications and some observations. Number one, the servanthood that follows Jesus' style seems to have the following characteristics. Characteristic number one, a willingness to be interrupted. I don't know about y'all, but I don't like to be interrupted. I don't care what I'm doing. I don't like interruptions. I want to do what I'm doing and get done with it. Is anybody that way? I get into a busy time. I get into the groove of doing something, and an interruption comes.
Greg, is there anything that we should do to those people that interrupt us all the time?
I don't know, Ron. Yeah. Servants are willing to be interrupted. Jesus was busy. Time and time again, he would allow interruption and would go on. In the parable of Luke 10, the priest came by, too busy. The Levite came by, too much in a hurry. But the Samaritan comes, and from the story of Jesus makes it plain that he was busy also. He had someplace to go, but he was willing to stop and be interrupted. Peter and John learned the lesson. They were busy. Many demands in that budding early church on their way to the temple, but a beggar man is lying in their way, and they stop and are willing to be interrupted. I don't know if it's Satan's work or just what it is, but it seems like every time there's a need, I'm busy. I'm interested in a TV program or a ball game, or maybe just that I've got my relaxing clothes on, stretched out in my chair. And I might not want to get up, and maybe sometimes I don't get up. But Jesus' style was a servant style where the servant was always willing to be interrupted. Number 2, a servant inspires hope in the one that is to be served. And everything Jesus did, he was giving hope in the lives of people that he was dealing with. Y'all ever know anybody that was kind of known for giving you hope? For giving everybody hope? I have. Whether it was to the blind or the lame or some other physical affliction, Jesus would put inside all of them hope. For those who were in distress, Jesus gave hope. Again, look back at the Samaritan in the parable of Jesus, the man who had been beaten and robbed, left by the roadside, almost dead. Can you imagine hope leaving him as people were passing by and not even helping at all? But then came a servant, and the man, no doubt, began to have hope again. He provides care, and for the first time, the guy begins to believe that he might survive all of this. The lame man, served in Acts 3 by Peter and John, and say, look at us. Already, there must have been a spark of hope that maybe he was going to get some money or going to get something. But the hope grew stronger when then finally they gave him his health. The action of a servant is an action that kindles hope in the one who is served. Is there anything in life that gives you more satisfaction than helping someone else, or maybe giving someone else hope? Isn't that a fantastic thing for the one giving the help and the hope? It certainly is. As you help others, it does something to each of us. Jesus said that it would make us happy if we were living the life of a servant, and that we would be. Number 3, servants use what they have. God equips all of us in life for various things, and God has always expected for us to use what we have. We all have different things that we're good at. Don, I call Don because I need help with the yard, the lawnmower, some of the equipment. He comes and he helps. That's Don's bailiwick. Something like that is what Don's good at. We're all good at something. We need to find out and use what it is that God has given us. The Samaritan servant, think about what he did. He was pretty equipped for the job that he did. He had oil and wine, he had a donkey, he had some money, and he used all of it to help that man. Peter and John gave what they had. But do we take the time and the effort? We're going to find some situations in life where you may want to serve, but may not have the ability. You aren't expected by God or anyone else to do what you can't do, but you are expected to do what you can do. So, in conclusion, the last thing, draw some conclusions. Do a quick check on your servanthood and mine. The last time you were interrupted with an opportunity to serve, did you take it? How long has it been since you gave a good dose of hope to someone else? And when was the last time you used what you have for the direct benefit of someone else? If we ever learn to serve, be interrupted, inspire hope, use what we have for others, we will, in turn, will be the happiest people on earth. And the Lord promises that we will be exalted by such service. All of us need to remember that people may not always remember what we say, and they may not always remember what we do, but they will always remember how you made them feel.